Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, there are a lot of good college football games going down Saturday afternoon. I don't know if there's one I'm more excited for than Nebraska heading on the road to play Indiana. Not only a massive matchup in the landscape of the Big Ten, Dill, I'm a dare to say, like college football playoff implications on the line in this football game. Because you look at Nebraska, if you can go on the road and knock off a top 25 team in the country, you look at the back half of the schedule outside of Ohio State, I think it's a very favorable schedule for Nebraska. If you're Indiana, like this is your first big test of the 2024 season, you can beat Nebraska, go to 7-0, put yourself right in that conversation. I'm fired up about this football game, but I'm most fired up, and I think Indiana fans will kind of agree with this. Just how good are the Indiana Hoosiers? Like they've looked, the eyeball test has been elite. Like you go back and watch some of these football games, been really impressed with what Indiana has done. That being said, what's their best win? Who's the best team they've played in 2024? It's probably between Maryland and Northwestern. So you haven't necessarily been tested like a team like Nebraska. That's what I'm most excited for. Fired up to get into this one. Now, before we do, and as always, and I think most importantly for this, let it fly in the comment section. So many different ways that you can look at this game, predict this game, whether you agree with the boys, whether you disagree. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, without further ado, I think we got to start with this Indiana offense going up against this Nebraska defense. These are two top 15 units in the country. You look at Indiana, 41.6 points per game. That's number 9 in the country. 7 yards per play, number 11 in the country. And it all starts with quarterback Curtis Rourke, who is not necessarily a quarterback that's going to go top 10 in the NFL draft. But you talk about college football quarterbacks that are in command, that are accurate with the football. The ball's coming out on time where it's supposed to go. And most importantly, not turning the football over. That's what Curtis Rourke has been for Indiana, going up against the Nebraska defense that it's one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. Dill, how do you see this matchup going down here?
In credit to Kirk Signetti and that offensive staff for putting an offense that, again, it just looks like Curtis Rourke, and you got to throw it together, obviously, pretty quick when you're turning over or coming into a new place with the transfer portal and all the chaos that kind of ensues when you do that. He's got that team. Like Curtis Rourke looks super comfortable. I think they have a really, really good stable of wide receivers who can do a variety of different things. In the offensive line, to their credit, that's certainly the area I think you typically look at when a departing coach or a new coach is kind of taken over a team as that unit that you certainly are going to have your questions about. They've played well. And again, I don't know that there's a ton of NFL talent on that offensive line, but as a unit, they do a really good job. They do a good job with their assignments, and it has allowed that offense to run really, really smoothly. They don't take a ton of negative plays in their wideouts. When they get chances to hit big ones, they've been hitting them. So again, you just look, they've been really, really clean. But I also, the end of the day, they haven't seen anything like Nebraska. I think that
not even
starts
close to this Nebraska defensive line. Like that's where this game starts for me. And I'm so with you. Like Indiana on the offensive line, they don't take a lot of sacks. They don't take a lot of negative plays. They are very good at staying on schedule with this offense. Well, guess what? Nebraska, they're really good at creating negative plays. They're really good at getting offenses behind the chains. How is that matchup going to look? I look at Nebraska and Dill, this defensive line, it has won them football games. You go back to that Colorado game, won them it. I think they won the football game against Rutgers as well. Not only Ty and Nash on the inside, and we've talked about this a lot, but the emergence of some edge rushers that have been so good to start 2024. That's kind of what you wanted to see Nebraska take that step from 2023. All the pass rush production was either coming from blitzes or kind of that inside of the defensive line in 2023. Not a ton of production coming from the edge rushers. Principal U, most notably James Williams, stepping up. What does this pass rush look like against this Indiana offensive line? That's where it starts. But I think the second thing I'm looking at is Indiana, as much as I just said Curtis Rourke is, I wouldn't say he's a system quarterback, but I think he's working the system very well. He can push it down the field. I mean, you look at Indiana, Curtis Rourke, 56% completion percentage on passes 20-plus yards down the field. An elite number. Curtis Rourke is very good at pushing the ball down the field, but I think more notably, these wide receivers are making plays like you said. Now you look at this Nebraska cornerback room. Is Tommy Hill going to come back? I think that's the first question you're looking for. I feel like there's a good chance of it, right? He was I think trying to go before the Rutgers game, couldn't. Now you get the bye week. You feel like you'll be ready, Dill. I guess I have a question for you. Tommy Hill's back. Can you keep Sayre Wright out of this lineup? Because I think if Tommy Hill's 100% healthy, it's Tommy Hill, Sayre Wright as your starting boundary cornerbacks here.
No, and honestly, I kind of look. I almost feel like Buford might be a little bit better
Nickel.
off in the nickel or like somewhere else. I don't know that he's a great boundary corner, and when he needs to come in and fill in a pinch and do it, I think he does it. But I don't know that he's got like great ball skills, frankly, when he's like just working on guys on the boundary. And I look like that's what you're going to need to have when you play Indiana, because they do a good job testing you in those areas. So I look, Sayre Wright's been nails. I mean, you can't really take him out of this lineup. And then Tommy Hill's probably their pure best boundary corner. So I look, you probably want Buford back into the middle of the field, whether that's at nickel, whether that's at one of the safety roles. And then I think you have two really strong boundary corners who fit, frankly, what I think Indiana's going to want to attack.
Yeah, to give Tony White his credit, like I do know Nebraska cross-trains a lot at the corner, at the secondary spot. And we've seen Buford play other positions too. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see Buford on the field, maybe not just as a boundary cornerback. I think those are the two matchups to look at. Again, I think it starts with just how good is Indiana up front on the offensive line. We're going to get that answer Saturday afternoon.
And also, frankly, what can Curtis Rourke do with a little bit of adversity? And if the plays break down and Nebraska's able to make him at least somewhat uncomfortable. Because again, what I think it started with is what Coach Cignetti's done, what that offensive line done, and probably most importantly, how those receivers have played. They've done a really good job of keeping Indiana out of bad spots, like tougher down and distances, and they make plays for him. So I think you look like if Curtis Rourke needs to shoulder a little bit more of that, does he have the playmaking chops to do it? Because obviously not like the greatest athlete in the world, and he'll use his legs effectively when he gets a shot. But I do.
You don't see him play a ton of off-script football, though, and you might have to against how ferocious and how disruptive this Nebraska defensive line is.
Because I guess it comes down to if Nebraska is as much better as maybe some people think. And again, I'm not necessarily saying they are, because Indiana's really surpassed my expectations. But if he needs to, like, again, when you play that type of game and you're less talented everywhere else, your quarterback does need to have some playmaking ability, and we haven't really had to see that yet. Because, again, Curtis Rourke has just kind of run this offense in like a very machine-like fashion.
No, playing off script, we haven't seen him do it. You kind of get the feeling he'll need to do it at some point to win this football game. Let's move to this Nebraska offense going up against an Indiana defense. You read the stats for the Indiana offense. Defense has been pretty dang good, too. Take a look at the numbers. 17 points per game allowed, top 15 in the country, 4.6 yards per play, top 16 in the country. Going up against the Nebraska offense that Dill struggled against Rutgers in kind of just a Rutgers kind of game. Like Rutgers will do that to you. More importantly, it was 25-mile-per-hour winds, so the passing game really wasn't there. I want to start with this Nebraska rushing attack. That's been, maybe I'll say it, like a little bit of a disappointment. Like 3.6 yards per carry, that's 91st in the country. I don't think Matt Rhule has run the football as efficiently as you would like. And Matt Rhule even said in one of his press conferences, like, hey, we feel like we're leaving some runs on the field. Like, you want to see a little bit more from the running backs. My first question is, who's going to be the running back that's getting most of the touches? Like, Ramir Johnson has looked quite good. And I know he's not necessarily a bell cow back, but has given you some really good reps. I'd say the same thing for Emmett Johnson. I think more importantly, Dill, you want to be able to run the football at least effectively, because Indiana can get after the passer. I mean, they got a couple edge rushers that can really get after it. How do you see this? Very similar conversation, right? This Indiana defense putting up really impressive numbers. Again, what's the best offense they've played? Probably Maryland and Billy Edwards. How do you see this Nebraska offense matching up against this Indiana defense? And what would you say is the biggest key for Nebraska to move the football against the Hoosiers here?
And here's the type of game I kind of like. Why wouldn't Nebraska try to like break them down a little bit? Because they play their starting defensive linemen. It feels like a lot. I mean, CJ West's on the field. It feels like a ton. He's played really good football. Yeah. I would say James Carpenter's been on the field. Like, those guys play a lot of football, and Tyreek Tucker kind of works in a little bit. But it does feel like they keep their starting four on a fair amount. And obviously, again, when you talk about those new teams, if you will, those first-year head coaches, typically they are a little bit thin, because it's just hard to build the depth in through that pipeline when you don't have that chance to get your recruiting base. I don't think Nebraska's really tried to break teams down on the run and break their will and be really, really consistent and commit to it. In some part, frankly, because Dylan Rhule has played really good football and they can throw the ball and move it that way very effectively. But I think you do really want to stay out of bad passing down situations. I think this is a team given frankly what I saw from Maryland, who actually did run the ball pretty well for the most part on Indiana, just got behind the sticks a lot, took a lot of penalties. I want to see if Nebraska can play that kind of game. I think we thought they could do coming into this year, where they stay on schedule, they run the ball consistently, and let Dylan Raiola just make those couple plays each drive he'll need to make to kind of extend them and just break teams down.
Yeah, no, I like see where you're coming from, but I'm also like, I think you got a special quarterback. Like, let him cook. And I'm not like getting at Nebraska for running the football not enough because of how good the quarterback play's been. But I'm kind of with you in this football game where you do want to test Indiana in terms of can they hang with Nebraska in the trenches. Like Matt Rhule, he wants to build this team to dominate the line of scrimmage. I think you made a really good point. You see this a lot with teams that have new head coaches. It's really hard to fill in the depth of your line of scrimmage play. And if you're playing Nebraska, if you're Nebraska, I think you want to keep this defense on the football field, test what their depth looks like on the defensive line. We'll see if they go to that on the offensive side of the football. Let's get into the pick here, Dale. A kind of surprising line here. Indiana 5-point favorites at home against Nebraska. Who are you rocking with here?
Now, this is a little bit gambler pick in me because I mean, 5 points seems preposterous. I would have frankly thought it'd be 5 points the other way if I was just setting the lines blind. 5 points for Nebraska. So I look at this and it makes no sense to me. So the gambler in me says I should be taking Indiana, but I don't get how Indiana's as good as they are given where Tom Allen left them and in kind of their ability to kind of be real headhunters, I guess, in the transfer portal. But somehow Kurt Cignetti's really made it work. I think you've seen moments where Nebraska struggled with teams that really stay in rhythm, in control,
Yeah,
and
Illinois,
don't
100%.
behind the sticks. Indiana does that about as well as a team I've
Yeah,
seen. Again, haven't really been tested by a great defense, but they do play a style that Nebraska has shown a propensity to struggle with. So I'll take Indiana.
I'm going to take Nebraska. And it's part of the – and I see where you're coming from. I think that was a really good point as well. Like, where did Illinois struggle or where did Nebraska struggle with? They struggled with Illinois. Indiana seems like kind of a similar offense that Illinois likes to do, like stay on schedule, use some boundary wide receivers, not ask the quarterback to do a ton, but when the quarterback is asked to do things, they can make it happen. I'm going to go with Nebraska because I feel like I know Nebraska better than I know Indiana. And that might be that might be the wrong way of approaching this football game. That's kind of how I'm going. Like, I think I know what Nebraska is. I think I know how good they can be. I don't really know how good Indiana is. So if you're giving me 5 points in a Big Ten showdown, give me Nebraska and them 5 points. I think this is going to be a phenomenal game that we're going to learn a lot about both of these two programs.
I'm fascinated because I feel like it could be either a great game. I feel like Nebraska has a very chance of blowing them out. I really don't know exactly where this is going to end up because I don't feel like I have any real sense of what Indiana is.
Yeah,
It's really,
I
really
think a lot of Indiana fans would say like, hey, we love what we've seen from Indiana in the month of October or September and October. But I think a lot of the Indiana fans who might watch the college football landscape as well say, well, we also know we haven't necessarily played elite football teams. Like Maryland just lost at home to Northwestern by 3 scores. We'll see how this game goes. It's going to be a fun one either way. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.